All right, so if you're just joining us, again, my name is Cassandra Kubinski. Very grateful and happy to be leading this conversation with Chris Aaron of the MLC today to make sure you, as songwriters and publishers, get paid everything that you're owed for your streaming royalties of your songs across DSPs. So if you are just hopping in, I will say one more time, just drop in the chat who you are. Are you a songwriter? Are you a publisher? What brings you here today? And where are you based? Just so that everybody can kind of get a sense of who's here on the call and who your songwriter and publishing community is here. And we're going to get started. So again, my name is Cassandra Kubinski. I am a songwriter and a performing artist. Started my career when I was 12 years old doing musical theater in Connecticut in a show called Annie. Tomorrow. Nope, I'm not going to sing it. Okay. I became a songwriter in college. And since then, I really had the pleasure of writing and performing my songs around the world. I've performed everywhere from living rooms in LA and Australia and upstate New York, here in Saratoga Springs, where I live, to stadiums like Met, Citi Field, Barclays Center, cool stuff like that. Along the way, I've really had some very cool, awesome experiences. I've gotten to write and or perform with some of my favorite artists like the Goo Goo Dolls, Chris Bodie, and even my personal songwriting hero, Billy Joel. Billy wrote the last single that I put out called This Is the Time. I've just put out 2 versions of that, so go listen to it. And I've had sync placements across networks like ESPN, ABC, Lifetime, also some independent films, including Target, a film that just premiered at the Roxy Theater in New York and is now out streaming on Apple and Amazon. And part of the reason that I'm so passionate to lead this discussion today is because I coach so many artists and songwriters who feel overwhelmed, confused, or behind, you know, that feeling like, I have so much stuff that I'm supposed to be handling administratively and I'm not. And so sometimes we get this sense of feeling overwhelmed by what we need to do to create both our impact, right? Like our music going out and moving hearts and touching people in the world. And also the subject of this webinar, our income. So I'm really passionate about simplifying, demystifying, really bringing a sense of ease and fun into these processes that can sometimes feel like burdensome to-do list tasks. And I've personally met so many songwriters and artists who have still not registered with the MLC. So if that is you, you are not yet collecting the money that is due to you from the streaming of your songs across DSPs. So I'm super thrilled to be here talking with Chris Aaron from the MLC about that today. And I would love to bring him on. Chris, are you there? Hello.
Hey, Cassandra.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this on behalf of all of us songwriters and publishers.
Thank you for hosting and helping convene this group. It's great to be here with you and everybody on the webinar.
Awesome. So give us the bio, give us the elevator pitch. Tell us who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into the same on the MLC.
Awesome. Well, as I said to you in the green room, I feel badly that I didn't bring a keyboard because I started out as a kid playing music and singing and performing in the same general neck of the woods that you did. I was over on the New York side in Westchester County, and aspired to be a performer and a creative right through college, but realized at some point that that was not my path, and certainly not where my talents were. So I eventually found my way into the music business on the business and legal side. Did that for many years, and after many years became frustrated myself with the fact that it seemed really hard to get all of the payment side stuff right for the artists and the writers that we would work with at companies. And that made me curious to know why. Why is it so hard? And that's ultimately what took my career into rights administration. I did that at Warner Music for a number of years, moved to Nashville about 6 years ago to help them centralize all of their administration teams. And then after having successfully stood that up with a really great team, the MLC opportunity came onto my radar, and I was incredibly privileged to be asked to lead the MLC. So here we are 3 years into the MLC, 2 years of operations and just under 12 months to get everything set up. And I'm excited to share with you and the others more about what we do and how we fit into your business landscape as a writer.
Fantastic. Yeah, there are so many questions that I know people will have. For everybody who is live with us on the webinar, those questions, please drop them in the Q&A as we go along. And the way this is going to break down is we're going to have a few minutes of a presentation up front. So some of your questions may get answered during that time. I highly recommend that you have a Word document, a Google Doc, or even like a notepad or email open so that you can grab notes, you can grab links, you can grab reminders for yourself. So Chris is going to lead that first part. Then we're going to move into a Q&A where I'm going to grill Chris from the songwriter perspective and ask some of the most often asked questions that I've heard from fellow artists and songwriters, as well as things that I was personally confused about. And I actually consider myself to be like a pretty, on top of it, songwriter administratively, and have had the honor of, artist leadership in positions with Women in Music and with Cafe Lena up here in Saratoga Springs. And y'all, there is a lot, right? There's a lot of info and there's a lot of things that we need to do to take care of our business. So we're going to try to make that really simple, easy, and again, bring a sense of ease and fun to it today. So I'm going to ask those questions. And the final portion of this will be that we will open it up and you will ask your questions and we will answer them as best we can. The end result of this, of course, we intend is that one, if you are not yet registered for the MLC, you will go do that as a songwriter or a publisher. And that secondarily, once you've done that, you'll be able to check and make sure that your catalog of songs that you have released to DSPs is registered so that the MLC is paying you. And then step 3, you get money. Hooray! How does that sound? Hopefully that's sounding good to everybody. So Chris, do you want to guide us into the info section?
Yeah, I'll put a deck up in a moment, but I just want to pick up on something you said because it really is so important. Rights administration isn't easy for anybody, including the people that do it for a living. And the one thing that I hate is that sometimes we feel embarrassed to ask questions because we think, oh, they're stupid questions. As a creator in particular in industry, there is no stupid question. There is never a stupid question. Everything that happens in our business happens because of all of you. And you're entitled to understand how the business works, especially when it impacts you. So for today, and hopefully for any other event you're at, please don't ever self-filter and say, oh, I can't ask that, that's silly. If you don't know, ask, that's how you find out. And I think if we can build a culture where all of us are curious and ask those questions we don't know the answers to, we'll all learn more, we'll understand better how it works. And as you'll hear, this whole system, it only works if you're participating. We can't know your data, your information without you being a part of the system. So you are really important to us being able to pay you or your partners properly because you know better than anyone else the songs you wrote and the people you wrote them with, and usually how much money you're entitled to receive, what share of those songs. So you are an integral part of everything we do. We don't want you to leave here without getting your questions answered. So with that intro, I'm going to share my screen and we'll run through a quick deck. The title of the presentation is, Are You an Independent Songwriter? Some of you said I'm a publisher, but I only publish my own stuff. That's great because all independent songwriters are also independent publishers. You are self-published or self-administered, as we say it, unless you have a partner that does that for you. And if you are a publisher for other writers, all the same information applies. So hopefully everyone here is going to benefit from something we talk about. The subheading there is, do you have music streaming? And that's important because as you'll hear, the MLC administers rights for songwriters that relate to music streaming services and some download services here in the United States. So this is about streaming, and we'll talk more specifically about the type in a bit. So what is the MLC? Great starting question. We are an organization created by Congress back in 2018 that sits between interactive streaming services and some download services that operate in the United States, and then all of you as self-administered songwriters or publishers and administrators of writers. So you're in the yellow box on the right. Those streaming services where your songs are available for fans to listen, they're on the left. We sit in the middle, and our job is to collect and process data and money from those services in order to pay you properly. We are the exclusive administrator, which means we're the only company that does this. And we administer a blanket compulsory mechanical license for audio uses of songs in the United States. I missed digital. I'll add that in. This is for digital. So we'll unpack that in a bit. But again, we are the exclusive administrator for that set of rights. The only exception would be if you had a direct deal with a service, which is pretty unusual at this point because most of the services have ended their direct deals and they run all of their information through the MLC. So if you're not connected with us directly or indirectly, you're literally leaving money on the table. Cassandra, I'm going to encourage you to jump in at any point if you feel like I haven't said something as clearly as I could, or if you have a follow-up question. So please feel free to interrupt. And certainly if you see anyone throw a question in the chat that you think would be good to discuss in the moment, do that as well. We want to make this interactive even in this part of the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for those of you on live, feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A section. I am moderating that. So, you know, if something isn't unclear or you have a follow-up question, feel free to drop it in and I will make sure to presence that. Thanks.
Great. So a little bit about the MLC. We have now more than 26,000 members. We're just about at 27. We have more than 30 million songs in our publicly available database, and we have received and processed more than 20 million song registrations. Those could be for the whole song if you are the sole writer, or they could be for a share of the song if you have written 50% or 33 1/3, whatever your share is. So on the left side of the page, we deal with lots and lots of data for lots and lots of people. The result of the work we do with all that data is we have distributed more than $1 billion in mechanical royalties to our members. We have completed 25 monthly royalty distributions, all on time or early. And we currently match just under 90% of all the royalty dollars we receive from all those digital services to songs in our database, which means we have the potential to pay out as much as 90% of the money today. We'll talk a little bit more about that because it may be that we can match the data to a song, but if you haven't claimed your share of the song, we can't pay you. So our match rate is pretty high, but not every song is 100% claimed. And that's, again, one of the important things for you to take away from the presentation today. We need to know what share of your songs you're entitled to receive. You tell us by registering your share of a song. That's how we pay you. So the headline, which I probably skipped, data equals dollars. This is more true than ever in the music industry and in every facet of it. The reason for that is, well, we have 30 million songs in our database. The largest streaming services in the world now have more than 100 million songs or sound recordings available to the listeners who subscribe to those services. So every month we're trying to make connections between the 30 million songs in our database and more than 100 million sound recordings that are on these services. That's why the data is so important, because without good data, we can't possibly make all the connections we need to between all of those songs and all of the sound recordings. Another heading we talk about, another tagline, is data drives discovery. So as a writer, it's really important for you to make sure that your songs credit you on these services. That's one of the main ways that we connect the song to the sound recording, and it's also how you get credit. So imagine writing a #1 song, but no one knows you wrote it because for whatever reason, you weren't credited for writing that song. It is about the money, but it's also about getting credit for the great work you've done. So data drives discovery. It's how people find your songs when they search your name on the services or on the web, and data drives the dollars. That's how companies like the MLC pay you. So the MLC is one of many organizations in the industry that administers rights. There are certain things that we do and there's certain things that we can't do. And I'm going to go over them quickly because what I never want you to think is that we've replaced one of your other important partners. And we're going to show you a slide in just a bit that lists some of the other partners you need to have. So on the left side of the slide, As I mentioned before, we maintain a public database of all of the ownership information for those 30+ million songs. So if you've written a song and it's been registered by you or a co-writer, it's in our database. You can search it and find the data for that song by using our public search. That's free to you and anyone else in the world. We administer a blanket compulsory license. It covers mechanical rights. Mechanical rights differ from performance rights on the song side. Many of you are familiar with performing rights. Those are the rights that are administered by organizations like ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR, Global Music Rights. So we administer mechanicals, not performance rights. And we do that.
Can you clarify what that is, Chris? There's actually a question exactly about that. What do you mean by blanket compulsory mechanical rights? So can you just give a little more clarity to what actually is the mechanical right?
Yes. So it's a great question. So a mechanical right on the publishing side refers to the right to reproduce and distribute your song. The right traditionally was implicated when a record company made and sold a physical record, but the same right is implicated when a record company sells a digital record, like a download, or when a sound recording featuring your song is made available for streaming. So it's the right to reproduce and distribute a song. Performing rights, a little more logically, refer to the performance of a song. The most traditional use of songs that implicates a performing right is radio. So, in the old days when you would listen to a song on AM or FM radio, every time your song was played, the radio station had to have a performing rights license and then pay performing royalties. And they do that to your PROs. The same right is implicated when your song is played in a venue. That could be a bar or a restaurant, or in a live venue like a theater or a concert venue, an arena, a stadium. All of those involve performances. One of the really interesting things about streaming is that streaming is the only rights type that implicates two sets of rights for you as a songwriter. So when your songs are streamed on a service like Spotify, an interactive streaming service, you get paid both a performing royalty and a mechanical royalty. So your performance royalties come through your PROs and your mechanicals come through the MLC. So that's a little bit more about the difference between a performance right and a mechanical right. And again, we're going to talk more about that, I believe, even on the next slide. So we'll come back to that and keep talking about that because it is complicated and it's not intuitive, right? In most of our lives, we get hired to do something and we get paid once for doing it. So I like to remember, like when I was a kid, I was a busboy at a restaurant. I got paid one check to collect dishes and bring out napkins and bread, right? One job, one paycheck. Today, one job, one paycheck, unless we have a side hustle, right, where we have a second job and a second paycheck. But as a songwriter in the streaming world, you write one song and you get two paychecks, your performance royalties and your mechanical royalties. And that is a pretty unique thing, but a great thing for you because you get paid twice.
And the mechanical royalties are...
Please.
So I'm just following up because Carlos, who's asked that question, how to follow up on that. So does it apply for the composition, like a cover song, or is it just for the sound recording? Is the mechanical right tied to a sound recording?
So all of the rights that we just talked about, the two rights, performance and mechanical, I was talking about them on the song side. But if you hold on for one more slide, Carlos, the next slide is going to show you the corresponding rights on the sound recording side. And for many of you, I bet, and you can mention this in the chat now if you want, my guess is you not only write songs, but you also may perform for and even record your performances of songs. So in that way, increasingly today, creators are both songwriters and they're performers, or they are both song owners and sound recording owners. So we also will cover the set of rights that complement the performance and mechanical rights on the song side, but on the sound recording side. So blanket and performance. And then the other thing, I should say mechanical and performance, but the other point was blanket compulsory license. So a blanket license is one that covers everything. So in this case, the law created by Congress established a blanket license to every song that exists in the world, now or in the future. And the license is compulsory because it means that the law automatically grants the services that send us the notice form and then send us the proper data and royalty payments, automatically gives them the license. You don't have the right in this space to say, no, thank you, I don't want to grant the license. That was also true in the physical world. Once a song was recorded and released for the first time, anyone else could record that song a second or third or more times, or cover the song, and they did not need your consent as a songwriter to do it the second time or any time after. So the compulsory concept is not a new one on the song side, but it is new on the digital side for mechanicals. So far, so good? We'll keep talking.
I do see a few other questions in the chat, but I suspect they may be answered as you go along. So I'm just going to make sure that if they're not, that we cover them at the end.
Perfect. And again, the next slide is going to go over a lot of this again with visuals, which I think will be helpful. So third icon there on the left side, the MLC, our fundamental job is we receive data from these services. That data is usually keyed to the sound recording because that's how consumers find and listen to music on these interactive streaming services. They look up an artist, a performing artist's name, or the name of a sound recording, and then they stream it. We match that data with the song data that we maintain in that public database that comes from all of you. And it's by making those connections that we're able to then determine how much to distribute to each songwriter. And that's the fourth piece. We collect and distribute that money to all of you as self-administered songwriters, or if you partner with a publisher or an administrator, we pay it to your publisher or your administrator. Let me go to the right side of the slide because this is important in understanding other ways you get paid. And again, the next slide will lay this out again. So we do not administer performance royalties. We just talked a bit about that. The law does not allow us to do that. So for all of you that are members of a PRO, like ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, or GMR, and you should be a member of a PRO, they will continue to administer your performance royalties. We can't do that for you. They cannot administer your mechanicals for you. That's why you need the connection with us. We also don't administer digital performance rights. Those are rights on the sound recording side. Those are handled by a great organization called Sound Exchange, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So just like with the PROs, we don't replace Sound Exchange, and Sound Exchange cannot administer the rights that we administer for you. So you want to be connected with us both. We're not allowed to administer mechanical rights for physical products. So to the extent that you are, your songs are being released on vinyl or CD or even cassette, typically the record company or the record distributor is responsible for securing the mechanical license from you that allows them to then release a recording of your song on those physical products. So that continues to operate the same way. We don't administer mechanical rights for physical products. Fourth one, this is really important, especially because so many of you now are active on social media, and increasingly that social media is audiovisual social media, services like TikTok and Instagram. We do not administer any rights, nor do we collect any royalties for audiovisual uses of your songs. That is a separate set of rights or bundle of rights, and we're not allowed to do that. Finally, we don't administer or collect royalties when your songs are used outside the US. So if your songs are on Spotify in France, you're entitled to be paid mechanical royalties from those streams of your songs in France, but we're not allowed to go get them for you. You have to partner then with an administrator who can collect them for you or set up some sort of direct collection. So that's an important thing. So all of this is to say the law is very particular about what the MLC can and cannot do. And we want to be very upfront with you about that because we don't want you to leave any of those other royalty streams on the side. And at the same time, we don't want you to think that because you already have a great partner in a PRO or Sound Exchange that you don't need us. You want to make sure you're paid by all the people that administer rights for you. And that's where this next slide comes in. So where do we fit in? As I was saying, there are a set of rights on the song side that we were talking about. So number one, performance royalties for musical works. That's just another name for song. And then number two, mechanical royalties, again, for musical works or your songs. On the sound recording side, if you are the owner of a sound recording, you're entitled to master royalties or the proceeds of the sale of your sound recordings or the streams. And then there are also some performance royalties on the sound recording side, though they are not as broad as the performance royalties on the song side. So all of this looks like this visually. And I'll just give you a heads up now. The next slide I'm going to show is going to be a QR code that you can use right now, or when I put it up on the screen with your phone, to scan and then get a copy of this chart. So if you want to keep this and study this later, or print out a copy, you can scan that QR code in just a moment and get a copy. So what this does is it lays out those 4 different royalty streams, right streams, left to right. The first 2 relate to musical works, which again is just a fancy name for songs. So if you're a songwriter, you want to make sure you are receiving the royalties for those first 2 sets of rights. And if you're a performer of sound recordings, then the 3rd and the 4th sets of rights are relevant to you. If you do both, then you need to know about all 4 of those. So these are 4 different ways you can get paid, and this is all just for digital audio. So again, audio-visual is a whole nother thing. Cassandra, so far so good?
Yeah, I think so. I do see a question about whether or not participants will be able to have a copy of all of the slides. Is that also going to be sent out in the follow-up email?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. So Amy, I hope that answers your question, and everybody who is live. And if you registered at all for this, please check your email afterwards within the next couple of days for both the replay link to this presentation and also the slides from the presentation.
Okay. All right. So again, going over what we just talked about left to right, as a songwriter, when your songs are made available on digital services, particularly streaming services and download services, you want to have a connection with a public performance organization, a performing rights organization, or a PRO. The 4 biggest ones in the US are ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR. So if you are a songwriter, hopefully you already have that connection. If you don't, you should pick one and sign up for them. And on the mechanical side, the blanket mechanical royalties come through the MLC, but it's possible that you might get paid from a record company, or if a DSP has a direct license with you, or a voluntary license, those royalties could come through them as well. So you'll see next to the MLC logo, it says streams, DSPs or their administrators. That would be, again, for a voluntary license that you maintain directly with them. And for downloads, those can still be paid by record companies. One important distinction I want to make, if you go just below the logos, you'll see in the public performance section, public performance royalties are divided into publisher shares and writer shares. So every time your song is performed, the money gets divided into those 2 shares. That's why, as a writer, it's so important that every writer be signed up with a PRO, because generally speaking, the PROs only want to pay that writer share to you directly. It does not automatically go to your publisher. Now, you have the ability to sell your writer share now, and that's something that you can do. But certainly for the early part of your career, that separate writer share is protected. So even if you do a publishing deal, you still get to collect that writer money from the PRO directly. So every writer, whether you have a publisher or not, should be signed up with a PRO so that you get your writer share. If you don't have a publisher or an administrator, or to put it another way, if you act as your own publisher, then you collect both the publisher share and the writer share. And you just want to make sure that the PRO that you are a member of knows that you are both your publisher and your writer, and then you get both sides of that. The mechanical shares don't work that way. The law does not divide them up. So if you are self-administered or self-published, meaning you do your own publishing, you collect all the mechanicals that we have for your songs. But if you have a publisher or an administrator, they collect all the money, all the mechanicals that we receive for your songs. That's why not every songwriter needs to be a member of the MLC. If you have a publisher or an administrator and they represent all of your songs, then as long as they are a member of the MLC, we'll pay them all the money for your songs that we collect, and then they will pay you whatever they're obligated to pay you under your contract with them.
So I want to jump in and clarify something on that, Chris. So I think, it's sort of clear to people what it looks like if you sign with a publisher. If you are a songwriter and you actually sign a publishing deal, and now everything that you write under the terms of that deal is related and in a relationship with that publisher, I feel like that's pretty clear. But what is a publishing administrator? When you say that, like who might be an example of one of those?
Yeah. There are a couple different types, but the way to think about it is like this. Music publishers and administrators all collect money that's earned by your songs. So all of them collect money, but a music publisher also does all sorts of things to help cultivate your creative career. So they will help you get co-writes and put you in writing sessions. And then once you've written songs, they will actively pitch your songs both to be recorded by artists, performing artists, and also for things like sync uses. So music publishers often offer additional services to you as a creative, whereas an administrator tends to only offer the collection service. They deal with the money. So it's important to know what kind of person you've partnered with. Music publishers will generally tell you they're music publishers, and they will often pitch you on all the things they can do for you creatively in the first instance, because that's an important way for you to grow as a writer and to build an audience. But they always collect money as well. Administrators will tend to focus on the financial. There are companies that specialize in administration, smaller companies, and then there are companies like TuneCore or CD Baby, who you will know as sound recording distributors, who also offer administration as an add-on service. So some are companies that just focus on the admin of publishing rights. A company like SongTrust is a great example of a publishing administrator. And then again, there are companies that do sound recording distribution, and they add publishing administration services as an optional add-on.
Right. So for some of you who are artists who are releasing your work to a distributor like a CD Baby or a TuneCore or a Symphonic or a 1RPM or whatever distributor you're using, you may see an option to upgrade to having publishing administration. Usually those services are an extra fee for the service, but those are the services that Chris is referring to. And in the back end, those services are often administered through a company like SongTrust or Centric. You could find that out simply by asking your distributor. If you see that option, you want to know who is the company that's doing the publishing administration, you can just simply ask them. It's not like secret hidden information. So, that is definitely something that has come up. And I've found a lot of confusion among songwriters who say, well, I distribute my music, so shouldn't the MLC be getting the info from my distributor? It sounds like, Chris, the answer is not, unless you've actually opted into that the publishing admin agreement. Is that true?
That's exactly right. Yes. And so, right here, it's important to then acknowledge that there are several different ways you can set up the business side of your business as a songwriter. You can choose to do it all yourself, and we certainly encourage that if you're interested, and we try to make it as easy for you as we can. But you don't have to do that. And for many people, it is preferable to either elect to have one of those companies also provide publishing admin, or for you to find a publishing administrator, or if you have a publishing deal, to let your publisher do it. And there's no right answer. So we'll work with you or your partners, regardless of how you set up your business. You have to decide how you want to spend your time. And that, I think, is a really important question, right? Because it helps you to start to think about your time as an asset of your business. As a songwriter, there are only so many hours in the day when you can write songs with people. And being a creative is really demanding. So, you also need to have time to live your life and to go out and experience things. You can't just be constantly working 24/7. For many writers, especially writers who are, enjoying some success, and they're maybe doing co-writes 4 or 5 days a week, the prospect of also dealing with the administration is too much, right? Because they're going to be doing that all weekend, and then Monday they got to be back in the writer's room being creative. So you have to be honest with yourself and decide, is this the thing that I'm best suited to do? Is it the best use of my time, or is it not? And I think there's no right answer, but every creative should ask that question. And of course, what this chart emphasizes is you should know how you've answered it. So you don't want to leave today not knowing how your mechanical rights are administered. You want to know.
On this chart,
yeah.
Sorry, Chris, just so on this chart, we do have a quick question for the musical works nomenclature. Does that refer to only the composition, only the sound recording, or both?
The composition. So musical works, composition, song, those are all the same. They're different words for the same thing. And then on the right, as you'll see, sound recording is the recording of a performance of a song or a musical work or a composition.
Okay, great. There are a couple other questions regarding mechanicals. Do you want to answer those now or finish up with this slide and then answer them?
Whatever you'd like.
So really quick, Carlos wants to know, is there any directory where we can find similar organizations outside the US that administer and pay the mechanicals for streaming outside the US?
That's a great question. I'm not aware of a definitive directory. There are similar collective management organizations like the MLC in most territories, most countries around the world. And you may be able to join those directly. There are also companies that will offer global administration services or services outside the US. What I would recommend is going to websites for people like Ari's Take. He's a great independent creator advocate. He does a lot of, he puts out a lot of content talking about the different options there are in the market. So I would encourage you to look at sites like that, or you might check out other industry sites. I don't know if Music Biz has a directory that could be useful for looking for those options as well. Those would be my suggestions.
And if you were looking, great suggestions, thank you. And if you were to, for instance, be Googling for the counterpart to the MLC in another country, what search term might you put in? Like, you know, let's say you were looking for, you know, who collects and pays the mechanicals for streaming in Spain or in France. Is there a certain search term you'd recommend putting into Google to try and like figure out who that is?
It's such a great question. And I don't think I've ever done this, but I would suggest mechanical rights organization, country, Spain. That would be a good way to start. You could also go to a site like the website for CISAC, C-I-S-A-C. That is an international organization of collective management organizations. Many of the ex-US organizations are members there, so you can probably find the local organizations in a given country by going to that site. And there are other creator organizations around the world that probably have good websites with information. So those are some suggestions.
Great. And just to follow up, Carlos, we had just kind of covered, so you're asking how does SongTrust fit into the environment? SongTrust is an option as a publishing administrator. So if you don't have a publishing administrator or you don't choose to administer your publishing on your own, you could, for instance, work with SongTrust, hire SongTrust or any other company like it. And you know, they would interface with the MLC and they would be your publishing administrator.
Yep. Good questions.
Crazy.
Should we go to the sound recording side, or is there more? Yeah, please.
Well, one thing on the mechanicals. So just a quick question. Zach would like to know, how does one collect on physical mechanicals if the MLC doesn't cover that? Would it be through the record label?
Yes. So the record label or the record distributor, they are still obligated to secure the mechanical license for every song that's on a record. So that is the practice that has been in place for literally 50, 60 years. That still happens. All of the major record companies, all the independent record companies have either departments or they work with companies that do publishing licensing. So if you see your song on a CD or a vinyl record and that record company hasn't reached out to you, you should contact them right away. they are infringing on your rights if they haven't gotten that clearance ahead of time, and they should be paying you. And that's how it will happen. It'll come through that record label or the distributor of the record label if the distributor is providing that service to the label.
Great. And just as a reminder, everybody, we're going to allow Chris to move on with his slides. But if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A box and not in the chat box, because the chat box kind of moves and I'm going to lose those questions. Make sure they're in the Q&A box. So go ahead and copy your questions in there and let's proceed.
So on the right side, 3 and 4, what you'll notice right away is the rights are described in the same way. So on the sound recording side, there is also a reproduction and distribution right, the right to copy the sound recording. So that sounds and operates just like the mechanical right for songs. But in this case, again, it covers sound recordings. Those rights are handled by record companies or the sound recording distributors and aggregators that you might work with. We mentioned a few of them before: TuneCore, CD Baby, they're Symphonic, 1RPM. There are well over 3 dozen of those. Probably, if we made a full list, there could be dozens and dozens more than that. So lots of ways for you to get your sound recordings up onto these digital services. And when they pay you, the first thing they're paying you are the proceeds for the sound recording. So every time someone streams your sound recording on one of those services, you're entitled to receive some money from your distributor. And if they also distribute for downloads, every time someone purchases one of your sound recordings, you are entitled to a portion of the proceeds for the sound recording sale. So that's the third set of rights. And then the fourth set are the digital performance rights. Those look and operate a whole lot like the public performance rights under number 1 on the song side, but these again relate to the sound recording side. The one nuance is that the scope of performance rights on the sound recording side is limited to digital performance. So one of the real interesting anomalies in the United States is that while you as a songwriter have been getting paid for your entire career every time your songs are played on the radio, as a sound recording owner or performer, you do not get paid when your sound recordings are performed on traditional radio, terrestrial radio. But you are now paid a digital performance right when your sound recordings are performed on digital radio. So think iHeartRadio, the digital service that iHeart maintains, or a radio service like a Pandora, or a SiriusXM. And as the business shifts more and more to the digital, the good news is you're getting more and more performance rights as a sound recording owner, as well as a song owner on the public performance side. SoundExchange is the exclusive administrator of those digital performance rights in the United States. So in that way, the MLC looks a lot like SoundExchange. We're the sole organization for that set of rights. They are the sole organization for the digital performance rights. But again, they operate on the sound recording side. Another interesting thing to note, just like on the song side, your digital performance rights for SoundExchange are also divided into shares. There's a label share, there's a featured artist share, and then interestingly, there is also a non-featured artist share. So if you are a background performer or singer, there's a portion of those royalties that gets paid to a fund operated by the unions that you can access as a background performer. So there are actually 3 shares, but the primary shares are label and featured artist. The non-featured artist share is relatively small. So again, if you're a performer, you want to be a member of SoundExchange, and then obviously you want to either know how your sound recordings are getting out into the market via your distributor, or if you have signed with a record label or you've performed for a record label, you want to make sure they're paying you your share of the proceeds for the sound recording. So 4 ways to get paid: public performance, mechanicals on the song side, that's 1 and 2 on the left, and then reproduction and distribution rights or proceeds for your sound recordings under 3, and digital performance rights on the right, that's 4. As I said before, I'm going to put up that QR code in just a moment, so get your phones ready. One thing I want to explain, and at the bottom left, you'll see there's a little bit of a legend. You don't get paid all 4 ways for every type of exploitation. But generally speaking, if your songs are available on digital services, they're probably available in all three of the categories we've listed there, which is why we just say, make sure you've got all four connections if you are both a songwriter and a performer. But the main distinction I want to make is that the MLC administers a set of rights that involve interactive streams and then some downloads. Interactive streams are streams on services where you get to pick every song you listen to. So if you want to go on to Spotify and all you want to do is listen to songs that were written by Cassandra, you can choose all day, every day, songs by Cassandra. And if you want to then suddenly mix it up and say, I'd like to perform songs by U2, you can then switch to a U2 song. You get to choose. That's what interactive means. Non-interactive is a service that acts like radio, where the service decides what you're going to listen to. And you may be able to say, hey, I like artists like Cassandra, and they will then play you a song or two by Cassandra in a given hour, but they're going to mix it up with other songs they think are similar to Cassandra's music. And the most you'll get is the ability to fast forward a couple of times if you don't like a song that they service up. So non-interactive is like radio. Interactive is you get to choose, and the MLC administers the mechanicals for interactive streaming services. And again, a handful of smaller download services. Most of the big download services like Apple Music, they still operate under licenses that the record labels give to them. So we've thrown a lot out there. I'm sure there are a few more questions, but while we answer some of those questions, I'm going to go to the next slide so that anybody who wants it can get that code. So there it is. And Cassandra, if you see some questions that you want to ask now, I'm happy to throw them in the mix.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I just feel like some of this you're going to cover. A lot of it is like people actually looking in their accounts. Let's see.
Yeah, let's not get too much into specifics, but I'll use this as a first opportunity to remind all of you, the MLC has a fantastic support team. They're available from 8 to 6 p.m., 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. You can reach them by phone, by email, and then once you're a member, using the chat feature in our portal, they are there to provide you with one-on-one support for as long as you've got questions, for as many times as you want to contact us. There is no limit. It's all free. So if you have specific questions about anything related to your membership, your songs, they're a great resource. They're easily available. They tend to answer the phone within 20 seconds. They respond to every email within a couple of hours. They're really responsive. They're well-trained. They're really friendly. So please contact our support team. And that way you can get really specific answers to your questions, and we don't have to air your questions in front of a group of strangers that may not need to know as much about your business as they want to know about their own business.
Would that be, so would you recommend reaching out to the support team if, for instance, you're inside your MLC account and you see that you have several titles that a co-writer's publisher registered to the wrong person, like you know, it's your name, but they registered to that name, but that's not you. It's like a different person with your same name.
Yep. Yes. And that certainly happens from time to time if you have a common name. So yes, for things like that, contact the support team. We'll look into that. We can get that fixed. Again, 30 million songs, lots of data, but they can help.
Okay,
there isn't
and
much
the support
more.
team, just FYI, everybody, the support team link to contact is in the chat. The MLC, our amazing behind the scenes staff, just dropped that. So the asker of that question, please go and copy that information.
And it'll be on the screen in a couple more slides. We're almost done with the deck, but this has been great. We got lots of questions during the presentation, which is always great. So let's just try to finish up, and then we can continue on with questions. So becoming a member, again, we've talked about this before. If you are self-administered or self-published, those two phrases mean the same thing. Even if it's just for one of your songs, you can sign up to become a member of the MLC. You can register your songs, those that you self-administer, and then you get paid. If you have a publisher or an administrator, they do that for you. But it's really important to know you can be both self-administered and published or administered. So for every song that you've written that's available on those digital services, you need to answer this question. Am I responsible for doing the admin, or did I hire someone else to do it? Many times we work with writers.
Just to be clear,
yes,
when you register, this is free, right? Like songwriters register and there's not a fee to register and there's not a fee to collect, right?
100% free. One of the great features of the MMA, the law that led to the creation of the MLC, is that it required the digital services to separately pay all of the MLC's operating costs. So unlike every other organization like this, like all the ones I mentioned before, and they're great organizations, they have to pay for what they do by deducting a fee, an administration fee from your royalties. That's how every organization in the world operates. But for us, we don't have to do that because the law separately charges our operating costs to the digital services. So it's free to join. You'll get 100% of your royalties, never a fee, never a charge.
So I think, Monica, I hope that answers your question. It was a bit unclear if you were asking, you said, how much do you charge for a track and album? There is no charge to match your tracks or the tracks that comprise your album inside the MLC's database.
So again, we'll wrap up. How do you join? This is a screenshot that shows our website. There's a blue button on the top right. It says connect to collect. You click that to connect with us in order to collect your mechanicals from us. That's how it works. And as I said before, membership is free. The DSPs pay 100% of our operating costs, so we do not deduct any administration fees from the royalties that we pay you. If you want to learn more about the MLC, our website is a great source of information. We've got tons of helpful information on the site under the resources section, the how it works section. We've got materials that are in Spanish and in French if you prefer those languages over English. Our support team, again, available, happy to help. I mentioned early on the public search. A great first thing to do is just go to the public search and look up your name and see if we have songs already registered for you. It could be that your co-writers or their publishers have registered your songs, in which case all you're going to need to do when you become a member is claim your share of those songs. So you may already see some of your songs in our database. That yellow button is what you click to get access to the search screen where you can do those searches of our database. So lots of information.
And again, if you have not yet registered yourself as a songwriter or publisher directly with the MLC, Chris, is it possible that if those songs that are matched that are already in the MLC, if they were distributed and opted into a publishing admin agreement, is it possible that a songwriter is already getting paid by the MLC on those songs?
Absolutely. If you elected to go with the CD Baby Pro offering when you put your sound recordings out into the world, and through CD Baby Pro, they're also doing publishing admin. They should be registering your songs, collecting your mechanicals, and then paying you your share of mechanicals after they deduct whatever fee they take. So your song should all be in there. So even if you have a publisher or an administrator, you should still go to the public search and look yourself up to see if your songs are there. Because again, who knows your songs better than you? You will know. Mm-hmm. And the public search allows you to check and see if your songs are in the database and then if all the shares are claimed. It'll even show you the entities that are collecting the shares. So if you're with CD Baby Pro, you'll see a CD Baby entity in the breakdown of the shares, hopefully next to the share for your part of the song.
Mm-hmm. And just, so for songwriters who are looking to match, right, to find their songs in the database, if you don't see songs that you have distributed that are streaming already, it's on you as a songwriter to register those songs directly with the MLC. Is that correct?
Yes. So the key to how we operate and most administration around the world is you've got to claim your share of the songs you've written. So that's a really important part of the process. We are not empowered to go give you money if you have not said, hey, I'm entitled to a share of the money for that song. And we also need to establish a financial relationship with you. We need to have a tax form for you. We need to know the bank where you want to be paid. So it's really important that you set up that relationship, or if you have a partner like a publisher or an administrator, that they set that up on your behalf with us. You would set that relationship with them. So that's really important. And even if your song is in the database, if your share of it is not claimed by you or your publisher or administrator, then we're not going to be able to pay you your share of the money. So as a writer, if you work with other writers, don't assume that you're good because Cassandra signed up and claimed her share of the song you co-wrote. You still need to claim your share. So this is the support information.
Question.
Yes.
A triple question on the registrations. So are you paying retroactive royalties? So if somebody's coming in registering now, are you paying retroactively, and how far back, if so?
That is a great, great question. So we have been administering the blanket license for 2 years and 1 month, 25 distributions. That covers uses back to January of 2021. So if you have not—
the reason for that, just to clarify, the reason for that is that the MLC didn't exist before that. So, you know,
yes,
if the MLC can't collect for you before that, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they just didn't exist. The law hadn't come into effect that created the MLC, right?
Yes, though there's an important caveat to that, but you're right. January 1st, 2021 was when the blanket compulsory license became effective. That's when Congress decided, and that was the date after which we began administering the rights for uses of your songs on all these services. So if you signed up for us today and your songs were up on services like Spotify or Amazon Music going back to January 1st of 2021, we should have the royalties for you that you have not yet collected, and we will accrue interest provided your co-writers claimed the proper share. And that's a big, important point. We don't know what your share is or your co-writer's share. It's incumbent on you and them to claim your shares and to do it properly. So one of the really important things is don't wait. Don't be the last to the party. It's kind of like when I was in college and someone would order a pizza. If you were the last one to go to the box, there might not be any slices left for you because everyone else grabbed slices. And there was always some kid who grabbed 2 or 3. So you don't want to be the last one there because all the slices of the pie could already be claimed. Now, if that happens, we can correct that going forward, but you may have to pursue claims directly against your co-writers for the past royalties we already distributed. So that's why you want to be there first. But assuming your co-writers claimed the proper share, we would have money going back to January 1st, 2021, at least for uses. And then there's an interesting additional facet to the law. The digital services that were operating before January 1st, 2021 had the ability, the option to transfer all of the remaining unmatched money that they had not been able to pay you to us. We call that the historical unmatched money. And there was almost $427 million of that money that those services had not paid out. So we now have that money. And since last May, we've begun matching and paying out those royalties. So if you join now, it may well be that we've got money from that historical pool that is also for you, for your songs, if they were streamed on those services before January of 2021. And some of that money goes back as far as 2007. So there's an added incentive to connect with us, and that is you might have older money from that historical pool that you can also collect in addition to the blanket royalties we've collected over the last 2 years. And then, of course, any new royalties that we collect as your songs continue to be streamed or downloaded in the future.
Great.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can just chat now. But yes, more questions.
Fantastic. Yes, yes. There are some great questions already coming up in the chat. So a few people want to know about registering the song registration process. Is there a way to make it easier by transferring in the data from a PRO like a BMI or ASCAP? Where is MLC already receiving that data from any other agency or organization? This is around people who say, you know, I've got a huge extensive catalog. You know, how do I get all of my info in without having to manually and individually enter each song into the MLC?
It's a great question. So we do not have a direct connection with the performing rights organizations. They are private organizations, and they're great, and we partner with them in lots of ways. But today, they're not feeding us information. Part of why that doesn't happen is it's their private information, but also the performing rights may not always be the same. One, because there may be different splits on that side, but two, remember, performing rights get divided into publisher shares and mechanical share and writer shares, and our shares don't. So the data isn't automatically transferable. That said, if you can get a list of your songs from your PRO, and often they will provide that to you, we can then help you use that data to then register your works with us. You can register your works one at a time using an interface that we have on our portal that's pretty user-friendly, but there's also a way that you can upload data in bulk. So if you had, say, 20 songs with some data from your PRO, there is a way that you can upload that in an Excel file. So again, if you have questions about that, the key is reach out to our support team. They'll talk you through the options, but there is no automatic way to move your data from ASCAP to the MLC. On the flip side, there is a great option. You can, once you sign up with us and get your songs registered with us, you can automatically export all of your data from our portal on demand. There's literally an export button in our portal. So anything you do on our side, you can export into Excel and take that to any other organization in the world you work with. So we've certainly made it as easy as possible to get your data out of the MLC because it's your data. We want you to be able to use that anywhere else you need it.
Yeah, and just to back up what Chris just said, responding to Robin and Robert's questions around this topic, I personally was able to contact my PRO, which in this case happens to be BMI, and receive that output. So request, an export of my entire catalog. There are loads and loads and loads of data fields. And then, yes, you would work with the MLC's support staff to format that data in the appropriate way that they need to upload it to them. But it should make it easier than you needing to individually type in decades worth of songs, Robin. So I hope that helps both of you guys.
Cassandra, my Q&A is actually not working, so I'm going to let you keep driving the questions if that's okay, and I will answer them blind, but I apologize, I can't see the Q&A myself.
No problem. So there are a couple questions. I'm just going to go top to bottom and address. Some of you guys have been waiting a while, so thanks for hanging with us if you did. And I might need some clarification on some of these questions. So Johan, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, asks, what if I have a song I didn't claim my royalties since 4 years? So we're not sure if that means, have you not claimed your royalties across any agency whatsoever, or if you just haven't registered with the MLC. I think Chris just explained that if you haven't yet registered with the MLC, what you need to do is go ahead and do that. So you're going to register your songs with MLC now, and then you're going to receive any retroactive royalties for streams of those songs in the US since 2021, as Chris just said. But if you haven't claimed your royalties in other spaces, like from the PROs or just other agencies that might owe you royalties, that's not really in the scope of this conversation. And you'd have to contact the individual agencies to find out how to get paid on that. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
No, but don't let that discourage you, right? There's no better time to start getting a handle on things than now. And I think most organizations will try to be helpful. Their job, like ours, is to pay you, not to not pay you. So I can't speak for them, but I would certainly encourage you to contact them and see how far back they might be able to pay you royalties for uses of your songs that you did not collect on.
Do you have to upload sound recordings of your songs when you register with the MLC?
You don't, and you can't. We do not have a way for you to do that. So this is only data. And I'll make the point now, I know data as a word can be scary and it sounds technical, but remember, your data as a songwriter starts with your name as a songwriter and the names of your songs. You all know that. And then it includes the share of the song that you're entitled to receive royalties for. So, if you and Cassandra co-wrote a song and you agreed, yeah, we're each going to collect 50% of the royalties, the starting point for your data for that song is the name of the song, your name as a writer, and 50%. There are additional identifiers. These are like social security numbers, but for your songs or for you as a songwriter that you may have things like IPI numbers or an ISWC. You don't need those. It's great if you have them, but you start with the basics. Your name as a writer, the name of your song, and the share that you're entitled to claim. So hopefully that makes it less intimidating. And if you have those three things, we can go from there. We can build from there.
Right. So there are a few more questions, and Chris, please feel free to clarify whether these are actually inside of the realm of what we can address on this webinar.
Sure.
So one question is, I understand CD Baby and others have an exclusive publishing opt-in, which can be a hindrance for sync placements. I am not sure that that particular issue pertains to anything having to do with the MLC. Maybe if you've heard this question before, maybe you can address that, Chris.
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. So when you opt to have one of those services administer your publishing, often the scope of rights that you are granting them includes the right to do sync deals, and that their ability to represent you in that sync transaction, they may not be as quick or responsive as you would be personally, because they're doing it for lots and lots of people. So sometimes what I've heard is if you land a great sync, you want to be able to grant those rights immediately, but you've now got to loop in your partner. And that may slow the process down. Obviously, they take a percentage of your sync deal. And that may not be something that you're as thrilled about, because sometimes your sync fees can be quite substantial. They can be thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what I would say is that's a good thing to be aware of if you are someone who has had some success securing sync placements. And again, just like we said before, it's really about how you want to structure your business. So for a writer who is focused on writing for syncs and who's had some good sync placements, that may be a reason why you want to self-administer, because it allows you to maintain the flexibility to represent yourself in those sync negotiations, to not have to give away a fee, and to be as quick and responsive when someone calls you as possible. For other people, you're starting out, you haven't ever done a sync deal, and you don't necessarily have any prospects for a sync deal, but you're getting your music out on the digital services. It might make a lot of sense for you to then opt for a service that does it all, because you're not worried about a sync deal. And if you do get one, you'll cross that bridge when you get there. The other thing is you can always change this over time, right? Even the admin services that we've mentioned, they generally do short-term deals. It might be a one-year term, something like that. You're not signing away rights for decades or longer terms the way you might with a music publisher who's making a financial investment in you as well as the creative piece. So you just have to decide what works best for you. And hopefully what we're starting to see in the market more and more are lots of options. So if the first company you ask says, hey, if you want us to do publishing admin, it's going to be global, exclusive, and it includes sync, and you don't want to do US with them, or you want to keep your sync rights, ask another. And hopefully you'll find a company that's willing to work with you and only take the rights you want to give to them, but not the rest. But again, that's an individual discussion that you're going to have with those providers. So I hope that helped give you a sense of why that might be a better choice or a less advisable choice, depending on what your business looks like on the sync side.
I think so. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Lawrence asks, what if you are a record label? Anything that you can share about how the MLC interacts with a record label, or what a record label might need to do, if anything?
So the easy answer is if you're a traditional record label, meaning you have an interest in the sound recordings, but you don't represent the writers, right? And sometimes the bands you sign can also be writers. But if you don't also represent their publishing rights, then there's nothing for you to do here. And in fact, the one advantage is because the mechanical license is a compulsory license, you can release a sound recording on the digital streaming services, and it will automatically get picked up. Whereas if you were to release a record on CD, you've got to do the licensing for it. So as a record label, it's just important to know where the compulsory applies and where it doesn't, and also when, right? Remember, the first time a song is recorded and released commercially, that first use, you have to get permission from the songwriter, period. And that doesn't matter whether you're releasing it physically or digitally. Once the song has been released the first time, then it snaps into that compulsory, and you don't need that permission for the subsequent releases. So that's really what matters as a record company, assuming you don't also act as a publisher for your artists/writers.
Great. If someone owns a publishing company, is the process the same as it is for a songwriter on the platform registering the songs with the MLC?
Everything is the same. In fact, the view that you will have as a member in our portal is identical, whether, to the one that you have as a songwriter. So what we like to say is we built a set of tools, and they're the same tools for you as a self-administered songwriter that the largest multinational publishers in the world use. And it all works exactly the same way.
Great. One question, does SoundCloud generate mechanicals?
Yes. SoundCloud is a streaming service, and every time a song is streamed on SoundCloud, that generates a mechanical payment. So SoundCloud is one of the digital services that operates under the blanket license that we administer. They pay us all the royalties for every stream of songs on their service. And if you become a member of the MLC and you register your songs, as long as we make those connections, we'll be paying you mechanicals for the streams of your songs on SoundCloud.
Okay, you may have covered this already, but what's the difference between blanket and voluntary license?
So the blanket license refers to that compulsory license that the law automatically grants to the services. But there are instances where a service may choose to do a direct license or a voluntary license. The voluntary comes on your end. If a digital service were to come to you and say, Cassandra, I'd like to enter into a license with you, but I want to have different terms with you than the blanket license terms, you can voluntarily agree to do that, or you can say, nope, I'm good. I'd like to be paid under the blanket license. So that direct license is one that you and they have to voluntarily enter into. It's a choice. The blanket license is a compulsory license. There isn't a choice. The law has granted that license on your behalf to the services, as long as they fulfill all of their legal and statutory obligations.
Great. One question, I'm not sure that this is in our scope, but we'll see, Robert. What are the current rates for streaming and digital performance rights?
Great question. The performance rights are negotiated by the PROs, and I don't know to what degree they share those with their members, but that would be a question for the PROs. On the mechanical side, the rates are set by a panel of judges in Washington, D.C. called the Copyright Royalty Board. So 3 copyright royalty judges who comprise the board set the rates. They're set every 5 years, and this January was the beginning of a new rate period. We refer to it as the Phono Records 4 rate period. So those rates will now apply for the next 5 years. The rates themselves are all pretty technical. They include or they factor into the formulas a percentage of the revenue the services collect, a percentage of the royalties they pay to sound recording owners. It's a bit complicated, and the end result, the per stream royalty that you get, will vary from service to service, really from service offering to service offering, and month to month. But as a member of the MLC, we share the rate sheets for you that show you how we calculated those per stream royalties. So each month you can see at the bottom of that rate sheet for every service for which you've received royalties, how much we paid you per stream. It's inevitably going to be a fraction of a penny, but you can see that amount. So we break that down and we share that with you as a member.
Great. Alp asking, what kind of papers do I need as an entertainment lawyer? Do I need something hard copy? I'm going to assume this has to do with paperwork with the MLC. Alp, I would recommend, any deal that you ever have, you want to have a signed deal. And these days, I don't think you necessarily need it hard copy, but you do need it signed and validated. But Chris, is there anything hard copy that people generate when they do an agreement with the MLC?
Well, again, the main things that we need to set up your clients as members will be a tax form of some sort, and then the banking information. And that tax form can be uploaded or sent to us digitally. So it can be generated digitally, or you can scan a physical copy and then send it to us digitally as well. So that's the main thing. In terms of rights, we wouldn't automatically need more paperwork unless you are claiming a share of a song for them that creates or is in conflict with some other rights holder. So at that point, we might say, hey, can you help us out and provide some additional paperwork? But that's very much a case-by-case thing, Alp. So in the short term, it's about giving us the tax form, a signed tax form, and the banking information for your client. And then the registration process itself is all done online. There's nothing you need to fill out by hand. If we need that substantiating documentation, our team will be in touch and they'll ask you for that on a case-by-case basis.
Great. Chris, I just also want to do a quick time check and see how we're doing if we need to wrap up on this at a certain time.
I'm okay for a few more. I see we're down to 4 in the Q&A. I can see the icon. So if you want to do a couple more, we'll leave and try to clear that out.
Quick question. Where does Harry Fox Agency fit in with this?
That's a great question. And obviously someone who knows a bit more about the business. So Harry Fox Agency is one of the companies that before the MLC administered digital mechanical royalties for digital services. Another company you may have heard of is Music Reports Inc. or MRI. Those were the 2 big service providers in this area. The MLC now does that work so that they don't have to do it anymore. But both HFA and MRI still provide other administration services for other sets of rights, particularly on the video side. So if you are a creator, you want to maintain your relationships with both companies since they are generally hired by digital services to administer rights. So if a digital service hires MRI, they may be the only way that you get paid is by having that connection with MRI. If the service hires HFA, you want the connection with HFA. So again, a really good theme is don't assume that the MLC replaced anyone else in the market. Just know that we have consolidated the way you get paid digital audio mechanicals. One statement from the MLC can have royalties from almost 50 digital services now that operate under the blanket license, but companies like HFA and MRI may still be administering other rights that we're not allowed to, that you will need to collect.
Great. If a song is directly uploaded by an artist onto SoundCloud and not through a distributor, will the streams generate a mechanical?
Yes. The mechanical is implicated when your song is streamed. It doesn't matter how your song got to SoundCloud. Once it's up and someone streams it, it implicates a mechanical. So unless there was some arrangement where, and I don't know that this exists, where you said to SoundCloud, hey, I'm going to put the song up, but I give you a royalty-free publishing license. Absent something like that, every time your song is streamed, they should be paying you a mechanical. That mechanical goes through the MLC, and as a member of the MLC, you would receive that from us.
Fantastic. And the last question we have, I think, is maybe a follow-up to previous. It says compulsory like BMI for audio, where you don't need permission except the first time, but need permission every time for visual/sync as it has been.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's such an important point. That's why those sync rights are so valuable sometimes, because you effectively have the right under the law to say no. So if someone wants to use your song in a movie, you can say no, or you can say yes, and you can decide the fee, or at least you have to agree on the fee. Your leverage may or may not allow you to dictate the fee. So synchronization rights, sync rights, you still get that right to negotiate. There's no compulsory license for sync. Now, what does happen is some of the services that operate user-generated platforms, they have set up systems where you have to claim your rights, and the law is set up in a way that may defend or give them a defense if you haven't cleared it. So they may not be asking you in the front end, but they're supposed to be giving you the ability to take down things. That's a subject for a whole nother webinar. But the point is there still is some ability to get things taken down. And that's why you'll sometimes see on sites like YouTube, the owner of a song can compel YouTube to take down a video if it contains their song and they do not want to grant permission. Right. That doesn't exist on the audio side where the license is a compulsory license. The law grants that on behalf of all of you as songwriters.
Great. So it looks like our open questions from our live participants are completed. Thank you guys so much for your amazing questions. And thank you for asking them. Because again, like Chris said, You know, we can't learn if we don't ask. And one of the kind of tenets that I've been living by these days is ask better questions, get better answers. So, you know, we really do often receive the answers to the questions that we're asking. So we want to really like think, you know, higher level and think about like what question is going to generate the result that we really want to get. I hope that the result that you all want to get is greater income, greater impact, moving more people on the planet with your music or with the music that you represent. Thank you all so much for being a part of that. Thank you, Chris, for your time at the end of the day, making this happen for all of us songwriters. So I did notice that MLC support in the live chat here on Zoom dropped in a big block that has, where you can contact the support team if you have other questions, and also where you can sign up for the newsletter, which I highly recommend doing, as well as all of MLC's socials. If you are joining us on YouTube or in the replay in any way, we're going to try to make sure that information is also there for you in the description of the video. So just hop down into the description and grab it. And worst case scenario, if you are seeing this in a replay somewhere and not seeing it, you are going to the MLC's website, and all of the information that you need to be in touch is right there. If you do want to be in touch with me, you can hit me up on socials at Cassandra Kubinski. The next place that I will be offering an artist up-leveling experience such as this, I will be speaking on a panel at the Make It Music Conference in New York on Monday, May 8th. That's going to be a really cool one-day conference specifically and only designed for indie artists who are looking to take their career to the next level. So there is a link for that, as well as a discount code. If you're using discount code MAKEIT10, you're getting 10% off of that. We're going to drop that in the chat for you guys right now. So go ahead and copy paste that if that's interesting. And again, just so grateful to all of you for spending your time. Once this replay is up, if you want to become a part of this movement, making sure that all of your songwriter friends are also getting paid for their songs on streaming, just grab the link to the replay, send it around to your friends, and you will have not only gleaned the information, but also become a leader and a part of this process for other artists, which, like Chris said, it only works if we all actually participate in it.
Awesome.
So
Cassandra, thank you so
much.
much for doing this and hosting. You're fantastic and a great model for, again, all creators. Every one of you can do this, and we're certainly here to help. So thank you, Cassandra, for hosting today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right, everybody. Cheers, and we'll see you soon.